Hey guys, tonight we drift into a tale of quiet shores and ancient whispers, where the search for the legendary Yamashita treasure feels less like a hunt and more like a slow, serene walk through time. You picture the soft waves, the scent of salt in the air, and the delicate rustle of palm leaves overhead. If treasure maps came with coffee breaks, you would have finished already. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and share in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of a quiet shoreline. The sand is cool beneath your feet, as if it has been saving its softness just for this moment. The air carries the faint briny perfume of the ocean, a scent that is both calming and endlessly familiar. A wooden fishing boat rests nearby, its paint faded to the color of old seashells. You run your hand along the worn planks, feeling the smooth grooves left by years of salt water and sun. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes slowly, marking the hour without any real urgency. The water glimmers under the moon's glow, silver threads weaving themselves into a fabric of light. Each wave lifts a memory from the depths and lays it gently on the shore. You watch them arrive, then slip away, leaving only a faint trace of foam, like a whisper that refuses to be loud. There is no rush here. Even the gulls seem to call in slow motion, their wings sweeping across the sky with deliberate grace. Somewhere in your mind, you imagine the outline of an old map slowly unfolding, the paper crackling softly, as if it too wants to speak, but knows the value of patience. You step forward, feeling the sand firm slightly under your weight near the water's edge. The sea exhales and the foam brushes your toes. It is cool and refreshing, as if the ocean itself offers you a small greeting before settling back into its gentle rhythm. An old lantern hangs from a piece of driftwood, its glass blurred by the fingerprints of time. Its light is warm, casting a soft golden color on the sand. You think of how light travels, all those tiny particles journeying from flame to shore just to keep you company. In the far distance, you can see the faint outline of a rocky headland. It rises slowly, like the back of a sleeping animal, unmoving and unbothered. Perhaps it has been watching these waters for centuries, a silent witness to every tide, every rumor of treasure, every ship that came and went. You crouch to pick up a small shell, smooth and pale pink inside. Turning it over in your palm, you notice how it seems like a miniature bowl, capable of holding the smallest drop of water. You imagine, half playfully, that this could be the world's tiniest soup bowl for an equally tiny dinner party. The night is still, but not empty. A light breeze brushes against your cheek, carrying with it the faint sound of something wooden creaking, perhaps a dock, perhaps a distant boat shifting in its moorings. Every sound here is gentle, rounded at the edges, as though the air itself is wearing soft gloves. You walk further along the shore, each step leaving a shallow imprint in the sand. They will be gone by morning, erased by the quiet work of the tide. There is something comforting about that, how the sea takes without asking, but never in anger, only in the name of renewal. A thought crosses your mind about how many people might have walked here before you. Sailors, fishermen, wanderers looking for work, lovers stealing a quiet moment away from the noise. The shore holds all their stories in its patient silence, never giving them away all at once. Somewhere along this coast, if the stories are to be believed, pieces of the legendary Yamashita treasure may have found their resting place. You smile at the idea, not out of greed, but curiosity. The idea that something could lie hidden for decades, waiting for the right eyes to find it, is quietly thrilling. The waves exhale in long, deliberate sighs, as if they, too, hold opinions about hidden gold. You find yourself wondering if they have been guarding it all along, tucking it away from careless hands. The ocean knows how to keep its secrets, and unlike people, it never forgets. Inland, faint glimmers of village lamps dot the darkness like scattered, friendly stars. They seem to offer warmth, perhaps a place to rest, or a cup of tea poured without hurry. Here, time is not counted in hours, but in the patient rhythm of the tides. Your steps carry you past a half-buried rope, stiff with salt and frayed at the ends. Once it may have tethered a vessel heavy with precious cargo. Now it rests among the shore's quiet collection of forgotten relics. A sudden splash breaks the stillness. A fish leaps into the lantern-lit air, flashing silver before slipping back beneath the surface. For a heartbeat, it feels like a performance meant only for you, a small reminder that you share this place with countless unseen lives. You close your eyes, letting the layers of sound weave together, the soft rush of waves, the whisper of wind, the far-off cry of a bird. The rhythm slows your breathing without your awareness, wrapping you in a gentle, unspoken lullaby. Somewhere beyond the dunes, an old path may still lead inland, perhaps the same path once taken by strangers under foreign flags, carrying secrets and heavy chests. Yet for now, you linger at the water's edge, letting the calm settle deep into your bones. The night gathers, not with weight, but with tenderness, folding itself around you like sun-warmed cloth. You feel your shoulders ease, tension dissolving quietly. This is not the start of a chase, but the first step of a slow journey where treasure, like restful sleep, is found only in its own time. You step away from the shoreline and into a narrow lane paved with weathered stone. The stones are uneven beneath your feet, smoothed only by time and the countless footsteps that have passed this way. Each one seems to hold a faint echo of laughter, quiet conversations, and the low hum of life. The air is tinged with the scent of something warm and sweet. You follow it past small houses with wooden shutters, their paint peeling in delicate curls like the edges of an old letter. A single lantern swings gently from a low beam, casting a pool of amber light on the cobblestones. A bakery stands just ahead, its door half open. The warmth inside spills out like a slow tide, carrying the rich aroma of freshly baked bread and delicate pastries. You imagine that even the most disciplined treasure hunter would stop here for a bite. After all, no map is worth following on an empty stomach. An elderly man stands behind the counter, shaping dough with the calm focus of someone who has done it every morning for decades. His hands are strong but gentle, folding the dough like a soft blanket. He nods when he sees you, not with curiosity, but recognition, as though travelers pass through here more often than you think. Outside, the town feels suspended between centuries. The walls still bear faint French lettering from the colonial era, echoes of days when traders, soldiers, and diplomats crowded these narrow streets. Overhead, a few weathered wooden beams retain notches from an old pulley system once used to hoist goods into lofts. A small bronze plaque catches your eye on the side of a building. It notes that in 1936, coastal trade here surged briefly, sparked by a short-lived pact between local merchants and foreign fleets. The agreement lasted barely 2 years, yet its mark remains in the architecture and market rituals. A cat the warm color of toasted bread slips silently past, vanishing into a narrow alley that smells faintly of drying fish. Nets sway overhead in the breeze. As you walk further, ocean sounds fade, replaced by the gentle murmur of residents ending their day. Women on low stools, peeling vegetables, their voices soft and unhurried, as calm as the falling dusk. Your eyes are drawn to a narrow balcony lined with small clay pots. Each pot holds a plant, some with flowers, some with herbs, others simply green and leafy. You wonder if the same hands tending these plants once held onto the handles of crates or barrels that arrived from ships far away. On a quiet corner, you find a carved stone marker. Its surface is chipped and its letters faint, but the date is still legible, -1904. Local tailies say it marked the boundary of a tax-free zone established briefly during a dispute between provincial leaders. The zone lasted less than a year, but its memory remains embedded in the town's stories. A child's laughter rings out from a nearby courtyard. You glance in to see a boy chasing a paper ball, his bare feet kicking up tiny clouds of dust. A woman, perhaps his mother, watches from the doorway with a calm smile, her hair pinned in the style of the 1940s. As you turn another corner, you find yourself on a small square lined with benches. A single tree grows at its center, its branches spread wide, offering shade to anyone who stops here. A plaque at its base claims it was planted in 1912 to commemorate a merchant fleet that once brought rice relief during a famine. The benches are worn smooth from years of use. You sit for a moment, feeling the wood beneath you, solid yet softened by countless moments like this. Someone pausing between errands, a traveler waiting for a guide, or maybe a soldier watching the horizon for a ship. You imagine the square decades ago, filled with merchants calling out their goods, with dock workers resting after unloading cargo. The French colonial influence would have been at its height, with mixed languages flowing through the air like an invisible current. A light wind stirs, carrying the faint scent of incense from somewhere nearby. You follow it to a small shrine tucked between two houses. Its red paint is faded, but the offerings inside are fresh: fruit, flowers, and a small ceramic cup filled with tea. Someone, even now, keeps the old traditions alive without making a spectacle of them. The history here feels quiet, as though it prefers to be noticed slowly. You recall reading somewhere that during World War II, certain coastal towns like this were used as discreet supply points by both sides at different times. Some historians still debate whether Japanese officers ever hid small caches of gold here while moving larger shipments elsewhere. The street narrows again, guiding you between walls of stone that glow faintly in the lantern light. You run your fingers along the cool surface, tracing the uneven texture. These stones have been here longer than any map, longer than any single rumor. They have seen occupiers come and go, yet they remain. Passing a window, you catch sight of a woman weaving on a loom. The steady rhythm of her hands feels like the heartbeat of the street, consistent, unhurried, entirely her own. A patterned cloth begins to take shape, each thread joining the next in quiet cooperation. You stop near the edge of the town, where the street meets another small dock. The wooden planks creak under your step. A single boat is tied here, its reflection wavering in the water like a memory that refuses to stay still. Somewhere far off, you hear the soft hum of an engine, though no vessel is visible. Standing here, you can see both the town behind you and the open water ahead. It feels like standing between two worlds, one steeped in history, the other stretching out into unknown possibilities. Both are calm, both are patient, and both seem willing to wait as long as it takes. The lanterns along the dock sway gently, their light creating shifting patterns on the planks. You take a slow breath, letting the moments settle around you. The town has shared enough for tonight. Tomorrow, perhaps, it will tell you more. You wake the next morning to the faint scent of the sea drifting through a half-open window. The air is cooler now, touched by the quiet promise of a day that will unfold slowly. The streets outside are hushed, as if the town is stretching before it begins its work. You walk toward the harbor again, noticing how the light glances off the water in long, patient ripples. Somewhere nearby, a radio plays faintly, a soft, crackling voice reading the news in a measured tone, as if time itself were in no hurry to pass. The news is not from today, but from decades past. You imagine a coastal morning in the late 1930s, when the radio was the heartbeat of distant events. Reports came in of Japan's expansion into China in 1937, each bulletin like a pebble dropped into the calm waters of local life. Here, far from the great capitals, those headlines would arrive softened by distance. Yet the weight of them still settled on people's minds. Men standing on this very dock might have listened with brows furrowed, not sure how these faraway battles would touch their quiet shores. An old fisherman you pass nods toward a wooden bench and gestures for you to sit. He speaks of his father, who once carried sacks of rice to ships requisitioned by foreign forces. He laughs gently, saying the sacks were heavier than the soldiers' tempers, which at least could be lightened with tea. In 1940, the ripple of war reached French Indochina. Japanese troops moved south, pressuring Vichy France into granting them military access. The coastal towns, once simply points on trade maps, became strategic dots in the quiet chess game of empire. The change was not sudden like a wave, but slow like the tide creeping higher on the sand. You picture the town streets during that time, foreign officers walking past the bakery, the sound of boots on stone mixing with the hiss of bread ovens. Perhaps a child peered out from behind a shutter, not frightened, only curious about the change in uniforms and the language spoken in clipped, precise tones. A curious detail, one the fisherman tells you with a shrug, is that some soldiers preferred sleeping in fishing huts rather than the barracks. They said the sea air kept them calm, and the gentle rocking of the water reminded them of home. It's a detail no official record cares to mention, yet it lingers in local memory like the taste of salt on the wind. As the war deepened, shipping lanes became guarded paths. The port that once welcomed traders now counted each vessel with suspicion. Even the tide seemed to pause at times, as though aware that something heavier than usual was being moved along its currents. You pass a warehouse near the docks, its doors sealed with rusted chains. The paint on its walls is flaking away, revealing the wood beneath like old bones under thin skin. Locals say it once held barrels of oil and crates of machinery destined for military use. Others whisper that for a short time it sheltered something far more precious. Kuk SPGA Vien Con Tran Luan Via Viet Nung Chien Hang Bai Empne, Ko Bao Ji Jiem Vang Hoek Kar He Kang. Some argue it was all practical supplies, meant only to sustain occupation forces. Others believe that, tucked between the crates of spare parts, were sealed boxes marked with nothing but numbers. A light breeze carries the scent of drying seaweed, pulling you back to the present moment. You walk along the edge of the pier, noting how the boards have been replaced in some places and left weathered in others. Each replacement is like a stitch in a fabric that refuses to tear completely. The horizon is pale blue, with faint smudges of darker clouds where the sky meets the water. You imagine ships approaching from that distance, gray silhouettes growing sharper as they near, their flags snapping in the wind. In those years, each arrival brought questions: friend or occupier, safety or new orders. One corner of the pier has an old iron bollard, pitted with rust. You run your fingers over its rough surface, thinking of the thick ropes once tied here, holding vessels steady against the pull of the tide. The bollard has anchored countless hulls, yet it remains silent about what they carried. In a small alley behind the waterfront, you find a mural painted on the side of a building. The colors have faded, but the image is still clear. A fishing boat at sea, nets full, crew smiling. Someone must have painted it during a rare moment of peace, capturing the hope that life could continue unchanged. You move closer, noticing faint bullet scars beneath the peeling paint. They're shallow and scattered, as if left by warning shots or someone testing a weapon. The wall offers no explanation. A few steps on, a narrow archway draws you into a small courtyard where a stone well rests beneath a weathered wooden lid. Its stones are worn smooth by decades of hands, some carved with faded initials. A local explains the well predates the French era, and during the war was one of the few sources of clean water when supply routes failed. You pause in the cool shade, absorbing the stillness. The war here was never as deafening as in the cities. No towering blasts, no endless tank columns. Instead, It moved like a quiet shadow, creeping through the town, touching every corner, leaving marks both visible and hidden in the rhythm of everyday life. The afternoon light slants lower, painting the streets in gold. A cart rattles past, pulled by a small horse whose mane has been neatly brushed. Its hooves clop steadily, a sound unchanged from 100 years ago. War or peace, some rhythms remain constant. As you return toward the harbor, you pass the bakery again. The same elderly man is there, lifting trays from the oven. He hums to himself, a tune that sounds older than the radio, older than the war, perhaps older than the town itself. And you realize that even in the shadow of distant battles, life here has always found its way back to bread, to boats, to the slow passing of days. The war left traces, yes, but it could not erase the tide's gentle pull or the town's quiet patience. You follow the curve of the shoreline until the land narrows into a quiet inlet. The tide is low, revealing bands of wet sand where the water has recently been. Small shells and pieces of driftwood lie scattered like forgotten notes in an unfinished song. The inlet is framed by two modest piers. One is sturdy, built from thick planks reinforced with iron bolts. The other is older, with gaps in the boards that reveal the soft glimmer of water below. Both have seen countless arrivals, but some of those arrivals came under unfamiliar flags. In the autumn of 1940, French Indochina fell under Japanese occupation. The transition came quietly here, without the kind of battles that leave smoke in the air. Ships arrived in the harbor, carrying not only soldiers, but new rules, new currencies, and a new pace to daily life. The people of the town adjusted in small ways at first. French signs stayed up, but Japanese characters began appearing alongside them. The rhythm of fishing trips changed, with certain days reserved for military vessels to move unobserved. Traders learned to offer goods that foreign officers preferred: tea, preserved seafood, even small carvings. An older dockworker you meet leans on his cart and tells you a detail not found in textbooks. During those first months, Japanese naval officers often paid for services with silver coins minted in earlier decades, coins that locals quietly kept as curiosities. Today, a few families still have one tucked in a drawer. Beyond the piers, a wide wooden warehouse faces the water. Its sliding doors are high enough for carts to pass through without slowing. In the 1940s, this space stored rice, preserved meats, and fuel. Soldiers moved through at night, speaking in low voices, their footsteps muffled on the planks. From the hill above the harbor, you can see how the occupation reshaped movement. The main road once open to anyone was now marked with small sentry posts, where guards checked wagons and foot traffic. The guards were polite more often than not, but the presence was constant, like the shadow of a cloud that never quite drifts away. Kuk SPGA Vien Con Tran Luen Via Viak Liu Nung Chien Tao, Vao Ban Neko, Chithio Kuk Kang Vang Hei Kang. Some point to testimonies collected after the war, describing sealed crates carried under heavy guard. Others insist that the cargo was purely logistical, meant to sustain the military machine rather than hide wealth. You walk along the water's edge, where a faint path has been worn into the grass. At certain points, the ground dips toward small stone moorings, each just large enough for a fishing boat. It's easy to imagine a quiet night in 1942, when such a mooring could be used to offload something without drawing attention. A row of low houses sits just beyond the path. Their tiled roofs gleam faintly in the late afternoon light. An elderly woman in a patterned blouse sits outside, peeling long strips from a root vegetable. She tells you, in a voice slow and steady, that her father once saw soldiers burying something near the dunes, only to return later and find the spot swept clean by the tide. You keep walking, and the inlet opens into a larger bay. The water here is calm, with only the occasional ripple from a passing fish. From this angle, the piers look like the outstretched arms of the town, reaching into the sea in both welcome and caution. A fishing net lies coiled near a stack of crates. The rope is thick, the kind used for securing large loads. You can still smell the faint tang of seawater in its fibers. It may have once been used for something other than fish, though the net stays silent on the matter. Looking inland, you see a narrow track leading to a set of stone steps. The steps rise gently toward a ridge where an old lookout post still stands. The post is little more than a square of weathered walls, but from its position you can see miles out to sea. Whoever stood there in those days would have known about an approaching ship long before it docked. At the base of the steps, a small shrine sits shaded by a bent pine tree. Offerings are placed neatly at its base: fruit, flowers, and a candle that has melted into a shallow dish. The shrine's paint has faded, but its presence feels steady, as though it has always been there to watch over this place. You reach the top of the ridge, where the wind moves freely. The sea spreads out before you, vast and bright, its surface dotted with whitecaps. To the east, the coastline curves away into the haze. Somewhere beyond that curve are other towns, other harbors, perhaps other caches of guarded crates. During the occupation, messages would have traveled between such points using both official couriers and quieter channels. Fishermen carrying folded notes under their nets. Merchants slipping a line of information into a letter about cargo. Not all of these messages have been recovered, and some may still lie hidden in forgotten trunks. As the sun lowers, the bay begins to shift colors. The water deepens to a soft blue, then to a muted gray. Lanterns flicker to life along the piers, each one casting a small, trembling reflection. The scene is beautiful now, but you imagine it during those years, when each lantern might have been a signal or a warning. You take a seat on a weathered bench overlooking the water. The wood is smooth from years of use, and you wonder who else has sat here. Perhaps a sentry counting ships, perhaps a dockworker resting between loads, perhaps someone simply listening to the tide. The tide is higher now than when you arrived. It laps gently at the edges of the pier, erasing small footprints in the sand. As it moves, it whispers in a language older than any map or rumor, a language the town has always understood. And as you rise to leave, you glance once more at the horizon. The occupation changed much here, but the sea's steady pull remains. In its own way, it has always been both witness and keeper. You leave the ridge behind and follow a winding lane that dips between clusters of houses. The scent of dried fish mixes with the faint aroma of wood smoke. Windows are partly open, curtains swaying gently as if listening to the breeze. The lane leads you to a marketplace, quiet now that the day's trade has ended. Empty stalls stand like small sentinels, their tabletops dusted with grains of salt from the sea air. A few vendors linger, packing away their goods into baskets and cloth bundles. During the occupation, this market was more than just a place for fish and rice. Whispers moved here almost as quickly as the tides. Prices shifted without notice, and certain items appeared only if you knew which stall to ask. A crate of fruit might be passed off as an ordinary delivery, but inside could be something far more valuable. An elderly fisherman leans on the edge of his stall and offers you a quiet smile. His eyes carry the kind of patience only decades of tide-watching can give. He tells you about a day in 1943 when a group of soldiers purchased far more baskets than they could possibly eat. The baskets were sealed tight and loaded directly onto a small boat, which left the harbor without delay. He lowers his voice as he recalls that one of the baskets, dropped by mistake, split open on the dock. Inside, beneath a layer of salted mackerel, was a small metal box. Before anyone could see more, a soldier had snatched it up and carried it away. You walk on, passing a low wall covered in vines. The wall surrounds a courtyard, where a fig tree stretches its branches over a worn stone bench. The tree is older than the war, older than most of the houses here. Locals say that beneath its roots lies a space large enough to hide a chest, though no one has dared to dig deep for fear of disturbing its stability. Past the courtyard, you reach a narrow alley that smells faintly of tea leaves. Wooden crates are stacked neatly against one side. A cat sits on the topmost crate, tail curled around its paws, watching you with the steady gaze of a creature that knows more than it says. A merchant once used this alley to conduct private trades. In those days, Japanese officers and certain local intermediaries would arrive at night, their steps light on the stones. No lamps were lit. Only the faint glow of the moon guided their exchanges. Kuk SPGA Vien Con Tran Luen Via Viak Liu, Nung Hork Jiao Dutch Ne, Che, Law Buen Lu Hang Hoa Quer He Con, Lian Quan Ti Viak Chien Veng. Some argue that gold was too heavy and too risky to move through such a public space. Others counter that its very ordinariness made it the perfect place to hide something valuable. You emerge from the alley into a small square. At its center stands a well, its rim smooth from generations of hands. The water is clear, but locals say that during the war, someone dropped a sealed jar into its depths. The jar was weighted to sink and never retrieved. Whether it contained a message, coins, or something else entirely remains unknown. Across the square, an old storehouse leans slightly to one side. Its roof tiles are mismatched, replaced over the years after storms. Inside, the air is cool and dry. Wooden beams cross overhead, their surfaces darkened by age. The floorboards creak as you step, and somewhere in the shadows, you hear the faint rustle of a bird. In the 1940s, this storehouse held more than fishing gear. Ledgers found decades later reveal unusual entries. Goods received but never sent. Crates logged but not described. Whoever kept those records wrote in careful, deliberate handwriting, as if they expected someone else to read them one day. You find a small window at the back of the storehouse, opening toward a narrow canal. The water here is still, reflecting the dim light of the sky. It's easy to imagine a quiet boat slipping in under cover of darkness, a crate exchanged for a whispered promise. Outside, you follow the canal until it joins the main river. The banks are lined with tall grass, swaying gently. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks, its voice carrying farther than you expect. A wooden footbridge spans the river, its planks worn but sturdy. Standing in the middle of the bridge, you can see where the river meets the bay. The current moves steadily, as though carrying secrets from the inland hills toward the open sea. If something heavy were dropped here, it could be carried far before anyone found it. An old man fishing from the bridge glances at you and says, almost as if to himself, that sometimes the river gives things back. Once, after a strong storm, a small rusted box washed up along the bank. It was empty, but its lock had been broken cleanly, as though opened in haste. The path beyond the bridge leads you toward the quiet outskirts of town, where the air turns cooler and carries a faint scent of pine. A narrow dirt track runs alongside a row of weathered stone markers, their carved characters softened by time. Some stand as grave markers, others as boundaries between old parcels of land. One, half hidden in tall grass, bears the simple carving of a wave. Locals whisper that it marks the place where a fisherman, returning from a mysterious night at sea, buried something of value. No one knows what it was. A few have searched with shovels and lanterns, but the earth has kept its secret. The track ends at a high bluff overlooking restless water. Below, waves crash against black rock, spraying fine mist into the air. It is a place made for solitude, or for hiding something. Knowing the sea would help erase the evidence. The wind rises, carrying gull cries, and beneath them, a softer sound, almost a murmur, as if the town itself speaks in low tones about what it has witnessed and hidden. You turn back toward the heart of the town, the fading light urging you onward. Between the market stalls, the old storehouse, and the sea's edge, truth and rumor twist together, waiting for your next step. You find your way back toward the harbor as dusk settles. The lamps along the pier flicker to life one by one, their glow spreading across the damp boards. Each lantern sways slightly in the evening breeze, casting gentle, shifting shadows. Fishermen gather in small groups, speaking in low voices. The day's work has ended, but the rhythm of the sea never stops. Nets hang from poles, drying slowly. Buckets clink as they are stacked, and the occasional laugh rises above the quiet. During the occupation, these lanterns were more than light. They served as signals. A certain flicker, a pause, a pattern could mean all clear or danger ahead. Locals memorized these silent codes, passing them from family to family. You stop near one of the older lamps, its frame painted a dull red. A woman tending to a basket of clams tells you about her grandfather, who once stayed awake for 3 nights straight, keeping watch from this very pier. He claimed he had seen a group of soldiers unload a crate at midnight, each moving in silence, as though afraid to wake the sea. No record exists of what was inside that crate, but he swore it was heavier than any fish or gear he had carried. The soldiers placed it onto a small cart and wheeled it toward the inland paths. The lantern above them swung gently, its light falling on their backs like a witness who would never speak. You walk to the far end of the pier, where the wood feels slightly softer under your feet. Here, a bell hangs from a frame. It is not rung for ceremony anymore, only to warn of storms. In the 1940s, it was sometimes rung once at an unusual hour, a message for those who knew what it meant. Beyond the pier, boats rest on the water, some with sails furled, others tied tightly. Their hulls creak softly, almost like whispers. You notice one boat painted with a faded emblem, a half-circle and a star. An old man says it belonged to a trader who was friendly with both locals and Japanese officers. This trader was known for carrying goods others could not, sometimes silks, sometimes tools, sometimes gold. His reputation was that of someone who could hide anything in plain sight. He vanished after the war, leaving his boat tied at the pier for years before it finally rotted away. The man laughs quietly, adding that no one has ever found where the trader kept his most valuable cargo. Some believe it went down with a storm. Others think it's still somewhere nearby, hidden so well it has become part of the landscape. A narrow path leads from the pier to a cluster of houses. You pass a small shrine, its lantern glowing softly. Offerings of rice and flowers sit neatly in front. The air here is cooler, carrying the faint scent of incense. This shrine once marked the boundary between the town and the wilder, less patrolled areas inland. People meeting under its lantern were less likely to draw attention, blending in with the slow rhythm of prayers and offerings. You step into a side street, its stones worn smooth. Shadows stretch long here, and the lantern light pools in patches. The quiet is deep enough that you can hear the faint slap of waves against distant rocks. Halfway down the street, a wooden sign swings gently. It belongs to an old tea house, still open after all these years. Inside, the air is warm, carrying scents of roasted barley and seaweed. A few patrons sit scattered at low tables, speaking in hushed tones. The owner, a man with silver hair, remembers a night when officers sat in that far corner. Their boots were dusty, their coats damp from mist. They drank quietly, speaking only in short bursts. A local fisherman came in, placed a small wrapped parcel on their table, and left without a word. Later, the officers slipped away, leaving behind a few coins, more than enough to pay for their drinks, but far less than what such secrecy might have been worth. You leave the tea house and continue along the lantern-lit street until it opens into a square. Here, the largest lantern in town hangs from a tall post, its light bright enough to touch the rooftops. This lantern, locals say, has seen everything, the comings and goings of strangers, the hurried steps of messengers, the cautious glances of those carrying burdens unseen. Standing under its light, you feel a strange mixture of safety and exposure. The glow is warm, but it also makes you visible, just as it must have done for those who once moved through here under careful watch. A woman passing by pauses long enough to tell you, in a hushed tone, of a night her father once described, the night when the great lantern in the square burned brighter than anyone had ever seen. Its light reached far beyond the usual circle, touching corners of the square that had long stayed in shadow. It happened on the eve of a mystery. 3 men from the harbor vanished by morning. Their rooms were neat, their beds still made, their belongings untouched. No one knew if they had fled, been taken, or simply chosen to disappear. Yet the lantern had burned on through the night, steady and unwavering, as though indifferent to the absence. You glance toward the base of the lantern post and notice a faint scratch in the stone, a shape that could be mistaken for a flaw, but on closer inspection, it forms part of a compass rose, the marking points subtly toward the old watchtower. From here, 3 paths branch out, left to the market, right to the inland hills, and straight ahead toward the tower's silhouette. The lantern sways in the night breeze, its light flickering once before settling, as if urging you to make your choice. Your shadow stretches long across the cobblestones as you step forward. Behind you, the square grows dim. Ahead, the watchtower looms, and somewhere within its shadow, perhaps, lies the next piece of the map. You follow the narrow road as it curves uphill, each step bringing you closer to the watchtower. Its silhouette stands against the darkening sky, a narrow spine of stone and wood, unmoved by decades of wind and rain. The air grows cooler here. The scent of the harbor fades, replaced by the dry smell of grass and stone. Gravel crunches under your feet, the only sound besides the distant rustle of leaves. In daylight, the watchtower is plain. Weathered boards, rusted metal brackets, and a steep ladder leading to its platform. But at night, it feels different. Shadows cling to the corners, and the shape of the windows looks like a pair of watchful eyes. During the war, this tower was more than a lookout. It was a relay point for messages between the coast and the inland checkpoints. Men stationed here were sworn to silence. Their oath was simple: see everything, say nothing. An old plaque near the base still carries faint characters, nearly erased by time. A local historian once traced them and found they referred to loyalty in silence. No one is certain if the phrase was meant for soldiers or for the locals forced to serve. You run your hand along the wooden ladder. Its rungs are smooth from years of use. Climbing slowly, you feel the faint sway of the structure with each step. At the top, the view is wide. The harbor glows softly under its lanterns. The inland hills lie dark and still. From here, you can see the paths branching like veins through the landscape. A plaque on the railing marks the direction of certain points: the temple, the pier, the market. Another arrow points toward the Hollow Ridge, a name not marked on any modern map. One night in 1944, a sentry claimed to have seen a small boat approach the harbor without lights. 3 figures disembarked and walked quickly toward the inland road, carrying something long and heavy between them. The sentry followed their movement until they disappeared into the Hollow Ridge. The next morning, the sentry's shift was changed without explanation. His journal, where he had noted the sighting, was confiscated. No official record mentions the event. Leaning against the railing, you imagine the sound of footsteps on gravel far below, the quick shuffle of boots in the night. You can almost see the glint of something metallic under the moon. The wind pushes against you gently, carrying a faint echo, maybe just the tower's boards settling, or perhaps something more deliberate, like a warning not to linger too long. You descend slowly, the ladder creaking under your weight. At the base, you notice a small wooden chest tucked behind one of the support beams. It is locked, the wood dark with age. No sign explains why it is here, or who might have placed it. Locals sometimes say the tower keeps its own secrets. They tell of a night when an officer climbed it during a storm and never came down. By morning, his rifle was still leaning against the railing, but he was gone. From the tower's base, a side path winds into a grove of pines. The trees close around you quickly, their needles soft underfoot. Lantern light from the harbor can no longer reach you here. In the war years, couriers sometimes used this path to move unseen. Its narrow curves made it easy to vanish from sight, even if someone was close behind. Halfway along the path, you spot a weathered wooden post, its surface scarred by 3 shallow cuts. The marks are uneven, but deliberate. Old fishermen still speak of this code: 3 for danger, 2 for safe passage, 1 for wait until nightfall. You brush your fingers across the grooves, feeling the softened edges where years of wind and rain have worn them down. Whoever carved them is long gone, but the warning, or the invitation, lingers. A bird cries somewhere high in the canopy. The call echoes oddly, as if bouncing off something unseen, stone perhaps, or the hollow of a hidden structure. Moments later, the trees part to reveal a small clearing. At its heart stands a stone well, its circular wall mottled with moss, the mouth closed by a heavy wooden lid. It sits too far from any dwelling to have served as a simple source of water. During the occupation, this well was whispered about in the same breath as contraband routes and coded knocks. It was a courier's station, hidden in plain sight. At night, under the cloak of darkness, messages wrapped in oilcloth were lowered deep into its shaft, tied to a thin rope that moved so subtly it could be mistaken for a trick of the wind. Those sent to collect them worked quickly and without a word, careful not to let the hinges creak or the wood groan, because even in silence, the air here had ears. Rumor holds that one such message was never collected, a warning of an imminent search. By dawn, soldiers swept through the town, raiding several homes. Entire families vanished, their doors left ajar, meals unfinished on the table. You lift the lid now, and a breath of cool air drifts up from the blackness below. The bottom is hidden, save for the faint shimmer of water reflecting a fragment of moonlight. Beyond the clearing, a narrow path climbs toward a ridge. The ground grows firmer here, stones breaking through the soil, and the air smells faintly of moss and damp granite. Somewhere ahead lies Hollow Ridge, the name etched into the old watchtower's plaque. The moon slides behind a bank of clouds, and the path dims to a muted gray. Then a faint rustle reaches your ears. It is too deliberate for the wind, too slow for any small animal. Your steps quicken. The ridge rises before you like the spine of some vast, slumbering creature, its silhouette blotting out the stars. Whatever waits beyond remains unseen, but the way forward is undeniable. You glance back once toward the watchtower. Its dark outline still crowns the horizon, yet the sensation of unseen eyes lingers. Drawing a deep, steady breath, you face the ridge and press on, leaving the tower's silent vigil behind. The late afternoon light slants low across the town, pouring down the slope in a molten stream of gold. It settles on the old stone steps ahead, catching on their edges and hollows until each one glows as if lit from within. The stones are warm beneath your gaze, but when you reach out, your fingertips meet only coolness, the kind of cool that has soaked deep into the stone over decades, perhaps centuries. Each step bears its own record of use. Some are worn into gentle curves by countless saws. Others carry thin cracks filled with moss so dark it looks almost black. The edges have been rounded, the corners softened until they no longer belong to geometry, but to memory. Standing here, you feel as though you are not simply looking at a staircase, but at a long, slow conversation between time and those who passed this way. Below, the river moves lazily, a ribbon of shifting silver and gold. The light scatters across its rippling surface, breaking into trembling shards. Every now and then the wind stills and the reflection sharpens enough that you can see the sky doubled upon the water. It is in one of those silences that you imagine, or perhaps almost hear, the muffled tread of boots. The sound is faint, rhythmic, disciplined, the slow, even march of men trained to move as one. No voices, no barked orders. Only the occasional metallic clink of rifles brushing against leather straps, and the hushed swish of fabric as they turn their heads toward the water. The story comes back to you in fragments, as it was told, that one evening, more than 70 years ago, a small Japanese unit halted here at the river's edge. The war was still pressing forward in other places, but here the air was quiet, heavy in a different way. The soldiers lowered themselves onto these very steps, lighting cigarettes in near unison, their faces catching the same honeyed light you see now. For a time, they simply smoked, watching the river. Then, without ceremony, they began to work. From somewhere up the road, perhaps a waiting truck, perhaps a hidden cart, they brought down several large wooden chests. Each was so heavy that 4 men had to move it together, their shoulders bent, steps slow and measured. No one has ever agreed on what those chests contained. Some swear it was gold, looted from banks and temples in far-off cities. Others insist it was a shipment of precious stones meant for a transport ship waiting at sea. A few, more pragmatic, say it must have been military supplies, ammunition, rations, documents. Yet the same question always hangs in the air. If it was only supplies, why hide them here, under cover of dusk? Because when the soldiers returned hours later, the chests were gone. No one saw them loaded onto a truck or carried away. The only thing that changed was the air itself, thick with the smell of disturbed earth. Now, standing where they once stood, you glance down and notice something you might have missed before. Between the steps, narrow gaps run like fine lines in an old palm. One slab sits ever so slightly askew, its edge lifting just enough to reveal darkness beneath. You crouch, peering into the shadow, but see only the faintest suggestion of space, a hollow that seems to breathe out a damp, earthy smell. The scent is layered: wet soil, decaying leaves, and something faintly metallic like rust or old nails. It carries up to you on the rising wind from the river, slipping into your lungs as if it has been waiting to be found again. You press a palm against the tilted slab. It does not move, though it feels less solid than the others. In another place, in another time, you might pry it up with a stick or a crowbar. But here, now, in this fading light, you do not. The air feels too watchful. The sun continues to drop, and the light softens further, diffusing until it lies over the steps like a gauzy veil. The staircase has become a place of memory, each stone holding the weight of 1,000 untold stories. As your eyes adjust to the dimness, you notice faint scratches along the edge of one step, marks so pale they could vanish if you blinked. They look almost like pencil strokes, random at first glance, but perhaps deliberate if seen in the right light. A line here, a shallow curve there. You wonder if they might match one of the odd symbols from the map you found earlier, the ones you could not place. The connection is tenuous, but it lingers in your mind. Perhaps the map does not point to a single place, but to a chain of them, each holding part of the truth. Perhaps these steps are one link in that chain, their story bound not just to gold or soldiers, but to something older still. A sudden flutter rakes your thoughts. A pigeon swoops down from somewhere above, its wings brushing the air in 2 quick beats before it lands on the highest step. It tilts its head, one round eye fixed on you with a curious, almost knowing look. You stay motionless, watching the pigeon tilt its head, shifting from one clawed foot to the other, as if weighing an unspoken question. Are you, too, searching for what so many have sought and failed to find? Its gaze seems to ask. You offer only a faint smile, holding back any answer. Some truths belong to silence. A light breeze stirs the river, scattering ripples toward the shore. The day exhales. Shadows begin their steady ascent, swallowing the lower steps and the middle, until only the highest remains touched by the sun. You rise slowly, feeling the presence of the place wrap around you, not heavy, but insistent, like a reminder that something here is incomplete. At the final step, you pause. Behind you, the river continues its quiet labor, carrying light and shadow downstream. Ahead, the road climbs toward the town. You glance back once more. The steps, the water, the narrow gaps in stone, all remain unchanged, patient as ever. The story sleeps within them, waiting. You walk on, the image lodged in your mind. Someday, perhaps, the stone will open, and its secrets will step into the light. The path narrows gradually, shrinking until it becomes little more than a slender ribbon of earth beneath your feet. On either side, tall bamboo stalks rise like the soaring columns of an ancient cathedral, their vibrant green hues catching the fading light. The stalks sway gently in the breeze, their rustling leaves creating a sound unlike any other, soft murmur that seems almost like whispers just beyond the edge of hearing. You pause for a moment, closing your eyes to listen, and the sound becomes a delicate chorus, a quiet conversation between the bamboo themselves. It's as if the forest is alive, sharing secrets in a language only the trees understand. As you step forward, the air shifts, growing cooler and more tranquil. The warm sunlight filtering through the dense canopy above is broken into thin dancing blades of light that slice softly through the shadows. The effect is calming, like watching a slow, meditative dance of light and darkness. Somewhere far off, you hear the gentle cooing of a dove, its call soft and steady. Nearby, the bamboo stalks occasionally knock together, producing a rhythmic, hollow tapping sound that echoes like a slow heartbeat, steady and reassuring. It's a reminder that even here, in this quiet sanctuary of nature, there is life and rhythm, a pulse beneath the silence. Local tailies quietly tell that during the occupation, this bamboo forest was no ordinary patch of greenery. Soldiers moved with careful stealth along hidden paths, guiding carts wrapped in thick cloth to silence their wheels as they rolled over the soft earth. These carts carried heavy wooden chests, tightly locked and closely guarded, destined deep into the forest's heart, far from prying eyes. The towering bamboo stalks formed a natural fortress, standing like silent sentinels protecting what lay beneath. The ground was soft yet firm, perfect for digging and hiding the precious cargo. After being covered with earth and blanketed by fallen leaves, any trace of the buried chests became nearly impossible to detect. The forest seemed to swallow these secrets whole, cradling them in its ancient embrace. Over time, the memories of the locals have dimmed into faint fragments, passed down like whispers. Some recall a lone lantern bobbing like a ghostly glow between the bamboo in the dark. Others remember the scent of freshly turned, damp earth lingering after a night's work. Occasionally, a dog's bark would cut through the stillness, echoing faintly before fading away. But no one ever saw the chests leave the forest. Some believe they remained hidden, while others think they were quietly moved under cover of darkness. The truth has been lost to time, hidden like shadows among the bamboo. You come to a sharp bend in the path where the bamboo seems to lean inward, almost as if bowing in respect or conspiratorial silence. The wind picks up suddenly, rustling the slender leaves into a soft, shimmering wave. The sound is hypnotic, a delicate symphony of brushing leaves that almost forms words in your mind. For a brief moment, it feels as though the bamboo are trying to communicate directly with you, guiding your attention to an unseen spot just beyond the curve. They point with invisible fingers, urging you to listen closely, to notice what lies hidden. But as quickly as the feeling arises, it fades, and the gentle rustling returns to its natural rhythm, a lullaby of nature, timeless and endless. Beneath your feet, the earth is layered with decades of fallen bamboo leaves, each season, pressing the last into memory. This layered carpet softens your steps and muffles your presence, hiding you from whatever else might linger in the forest. If the treasure chests remain buried here, they are now embraced by the thick roots, sealed within the living heart of Vai, the bamboo fortress. They have become part of the forest itself, as inseparable as the soil and stalks around them. The path narrows even more, until you must part the bamboo yourself, your palms brushing the smooth, cool stalks as you push forward. The sensation is soothing, a gentle reminder of the forest's quiet presence. You feel the coolness of the bamboo against your skin, the faint texture of its ridges beneath your fingertips. The scent of fresh green leaves and damp earth mingles in the air, wrapping around you like a natural balm, calming and centering. Your mind at last, the dense walls of bamboo open up into a small clearing, a quiet sanctuary within the vast sea of green. The sunlight here falls softly, forming a delicate circle of light surrounded by shadows. You stand still, letting the tranquility settle over you like a warm embrace. The silence presses gently, not heavy or oppressive, but full of meaning. This place holds stories that refuse to be forgotten, whispers of the past lingering in the air like a fragile thread, connecting you to those who came before. Even if you never uncover any buried treasure, this clearing itself feels like a kind of prize, a place where history and nature merge, where the quiet pulse of the forest beats steady and true. The bamboo around you seem to watch, their green guardianship timeless and patient. They have witnessed countless seasons, storms, and sunrises, holding within their stalks the secrets of all who walked beneath their shade. Here, amid the whispering bamboo, you feel connected to the land, to the stories, and to the slow, steady march of time itself. You are part of a journey that stretches beyond gold or jewels, reaching into the heart of memory and mystery. And as you breathe deeply, taking in the cool, fragrant air, you realize that some treasures are not meant to be found, only felt. Take one last look around the clearing before slowly turning back toward the narrowing path. The bamboo close ranks behind you, returning to their quiet vigil. With each step, you carry with you the gentle murmur of the forest, a soothing refrain that will echo softly in your mind long after you have left the grove. The path ahead is still long, and the story continues, but for now, you walk through the whispering bamboo, cradled by their green cathedral, moving forward in quiet reverence for the past and the mysteries that patiently wait beneath the leaves. The library feels like a place outside of time. From the moment you step inside, the air is different, cool, still, and tinged with the scent of paper slowly surrendering to the years. Dust hangs in lazy spirals, drifting through beams of soft light that slip between tall, warped shutters. Somewhere in the quiet, a clock ticks with the slow patience of a creature that has seen centuries pass. The shelves stretch far into the shadows, their spines lined in faded colors, ochre leather, cracked maroon, cloth bleached to gray. Here, history doesn't sit politely in curated exhibits. It waits in forgotten stacks, in journals with fraying thread bindings, in folders whose corners have curled like dry leaves. You wander, running your fingers along the uneven row of books. Your touch stirs up tiny clouds of dust that sparkle for a moment before disappearing again. Somewhere between the colonial administration records and local Gazette archives, you find a small section devoted to the years between 1939 and 1945, the years when the world's noise thundered into this country's quieter rhythms. Pulling out a thick ledger, you carry it to a table by the window. The chair creaks under your weight, as if scolding you for disturbing its long nap. Outside, the world moves in silence, a few leaves brushing against the glass. You open the book, and the first page greets you with handwriting as neat as printed. Type, each letter inked in a blue, now faded toward gray. The entries are precise, almost cold. Troop numbers, railway schedules, supply inventories. Yet as you turn page after page, a different layer of the story begins to emerge. Notes in the margins, written in a more hurried hand, speak of strategic withdrawals and asset relocation. The language is deliberately vague, but the tone is urgent. And then you find it, an account dated early 1945, just months before surrender. 4 containers dispatched south via coastal route. Due to blockade risk, consider secure storage inland until retrieval feasible. Recommend location inaccessible to civilian traffic. The handwriting trembles slightly here, as though the writer's hand was unsteady, or perhaps pressed for time. Beneath the note, a faint coffee ring blooms like a shadow of someone's impatience, the mark of a moment when they paused to drink while deciding the fate of whatever lay inside those containers. You lean back, staring at the words. Could these be the same chests spoken of in the riverside stories? The same boxes dragged through the bamboo groves? The connection is not proof, only a whisper, but it's enough to make your pulse quicken. You turn to another volume, smaller, bound in soft brown leather. Inside are personal accounts from civilians, collected in the late 1940s by local historians. The voices here are more human, more fragile. They marched past at dusk. We were told to stay indoors, but I watched from behind the shutters. There were carts. I think I saw one man stumble. The chest was too heavy. They spoke quietly, as if not wanting to be heard. In the forest, we found a patch where the ground had been turned over. My brother swore there were wood shavings in the soil, like the kind used to pack fragile things. We never told anyone. Some accounts mention the Philippines, Manila, Mindoro, and the labyrinthine underground tunnels rumored to hold vast stores of wartime gold. A few even suggest a deliberate strategy, splitting the treasure, sending the bulk overseas while leaving smaller portions hidden in more remote corners of Vietnam as a hedge against loss. The papers rustle gently as you turn them, the sound fragile like whispers from the past. Though you've read about these events in modern articles, holding inked pages written by someone who lived through it all changes the experience entirely. It no longer feels like distant history, but a tangible trail of human presence etched into time. As you delve deeper, certain names keep appearing, not just places, but people, captains, quartermasters, local guides. One name stands out, mentioned both in official military records and civilian interviews. A Japanese officer described as someone who spoke Vietnamese well enough to trade jokes with villagers. Another note links him to supervising unusual cargo movements near the old Temple Road. You carefully copy the name into your notebook, the ink flowing smoothly, bridging past and present through this simple act. Outside, the daylight shifts subtly toward evening. Shadows cast by the window slats stretch across your table, creating alternating bands of light and dark on your notes. Hours have slipped by unnoticed. Your fingertips now bear a faint dusting from the decades-old papers. Reaching for one last file, you extract a brittle folder with a faded label. Inside, a single folded map awaits, its paper yellowed and worn, ink faded to sepia. Thin, tentative lines mark roads, and along a stretch of coastline, 3 small pencil X's appear, each accompanied by a date from 1945. Silent hints of secrets waiting to be uncovered. There are no explanations, no legend to decode the marks. Yet the X's line up in a way that stirs recognition. They echo the route described in the ledger entry you read earlier. Coastal, southbound, with the potential for inland storage. You trace the line with a fingertip, feeling the pulse of possibility beneath the stillness of the paper. Somewhere deep in the building, a floorboard groans. You glance up instinctively, but no one is there. The sound fades back into silence, as if the library itself is settling deeper into its watch over the centuries. You carefully fold the map, slide it back into its folder, and close the ledger with a muted thud. The air seems to grow heavier. As you gather your things, not oppressive, but charged, as though the room holds more than just dust and paper dot. As you leave, you glance back at the shelves, silent guardians of countless secrets, indifferent yet inviting. You know you'll return someday, drawn by the voices of the past that linger in your mind. Outside, the evening breeze welcomes you, and the library door clicks softly shut behind you, sealing the whispers within. The street feels transformed. As if beneath its stones and walls, the city's hidden heartbeat now pulses clearly, and you realize the search has already changed you. It begins with the faintest tapping, so soft you almost mistake it for the creak of an old shutter or the shifting of a tree's shadow. But then it multiplies, 1,000 tiny percussionists striking tile and wood until the air fills with a rhythm older than the city itself. Rain. From your vantage point in a narrow lane, you watch as the first drops darken the ochre walls, the color deepening as if the buildings are drawing in the moisture like a long-awaited drink. The tiles of the ancient rooftops, curved and weather-worn, glisten under the sudden wash. Moss clings between them, drinking deeply, their green richer. Now against the muted gold of wet clay, you pull your collar up against the cool air and step under the overhang of a tea shop. Its paper lanterns sway slightly, their red glow shimmering against the sheen of water on the cobblestones. The street before you transforms in minutes. Puddles bloom in dips and grooves worn by centuries of footsteps, each reflecting fragments of lantern light and the blurred silhouettes of passers-by. Rain brings a hush even to the busiest quarter. Merchant chatter softens. Footsteps slow and grow careful. You hear sandals splashing gently and a cartwheel's faint squeak on wet stone. Nearby, a bamboo wind chime sings with each breeze. The roofs above offer more than shelter. They hold history. Clay tiles shaped by hands familiar with both war and peace have been repaired and replaced over generations, carrying the stories of those who lived beneath them. Each roof bears its marks. A missing tile here, a slightly crooked slope there, a patchwork blending into a beauty beyond perfection. Rainwater streams from the highest ridges, pouring through carved dragon-mouth spouts. Drops catch briefly in, their teeth before falling like silver threads. The dragon's stone eyes glisten, seeming alive and welcoming the cleansing rain. From deeper in the neighborhood, the slow, deep toll of a temple bell echoes through the rain like a distant memory. You close your eyes, imagining that same sound 100 years ago, perhaps as a soaked courier sought warmth in this very tea shop, or an old poet penned verses by the window to the rhythm of the weather. The shop owner, a woman with her hair coiled in a simple knot, offers you a seat by the wooden counter. The steam rising from her teapot curls like ink in water, carrying the fragrance of roasted leaves. You wrap your hands around the cup she sets before you, letting the heat seep into your fingers. From here, you can see the lane stretching out, the roofs lined like the backs of resting animals, the rain smoothing their spines. A man at the far table is reading a newspaper from another province, the paper already curling at the edges from the humidity. Two children chase each other between the tables until their grandmother's quiet word stills them. All the while, the rain's percussion keeps its steady beat, sometimes soft and playful, sometimes heavier, like the drummer of an unseen parade. Shifting tempo. Your mind drifts back to the map in the dusty library, the 3 penciled X's along the coast, the dates written beside them. In the quiet rhythm of the rain, they seem almost to align with something here, in this lane, in these roofs. Perhaps the officer mentioned in the journals once passed through this very street, his boots splashing through the same puddles, his eyes scanning the rooftops for a sign, a signal, a safe house. Outside, a figure in a conical hat moves slowly. Along the lane, the hat's broad brim shedding water in constant rivulets. They pause at a doorway, knock once, and slip inside without a word. Moments later, another door opens across the lane, and for just a second, you glimpse the interior. A dim room lined with shelves, not of books, but of narrow wooden boxes. The door closes again, and the rain fills the silence. The tea in your cup cools, the steam thinning to nothing. You finish it in a single sip and set the cup down, feeling the faint tremor of porcelain on wood. Outside, the rain has softened to a fine mist, the kind that seems almost invisible until it clings to your skin. You step out from under the overhang, letting the cool air wrap around you. The roofs drip in unison now, a slow, steady rhythm that echoes down the lane. In places, the water has carved little rivers along the cobblestones, winding toward the gutters, carrying tiny petals, fragments of leaves, and the occasional stray. Coin dot as you walk, you notice how the rain sharpens the scent of the place. Damp earth, wet wood, the faint mineral tang rising from stone. Somewhere, a kitchen is steaming rice, the fragrance curling into the street. All of it feels ancient and immediate at once, as if the past has simply folded itself over the present without tearing dot at the end of the lane. You pause to look back. The roofs recede into the mist, their curved lines like waves rolling away from you. The lanterns are dim now, their red softened to the color of ember coals. The rain continues its quiet work, washing away the dust of days, perhaps even loosening secrets that have clung too long to the eaves and beams. You turn the corner, and the sound of the rain shifts, muffled now by a narrower alley where the roofs almost touch overhead. Here, the water drips in slower rhythms, the spaces between drops stretching like the pause before a whispered answer. You pass beneath them, thinking of the stories these roofs have sheltered, of people meeting in secret, of goods exchanged under cover of night, of maps unfurled and folded again before anyone could see too much. Somewhere above, a shutter closes gently, the wood clicking against the frame. Perhaps someone is watching you from the dark, wondering why you walk alone in the rain, what you might be searching for. The truth is, you're not entirely sure yourself. But as you step out of the alley and into the open square, you feel the pull again, that faint, unexplainable current that began the moment you started following this trail. And you know it will carry you onward, through rain and dust and shadow, until you find whatever lies waiting beneath the oldest roofs and deepest roots. The path into the garden was narrow and overgrown, almost hesitant to reveal itself. I had walked past this very spot more than once without ever noticing it. Only when the late afternoon light shifted, catching the faint curve of an old stone arch, did the entrance seem to emerge from its cloak of green. The arch was weathered but dignified, its keystone stained with years of rain and lichen. Just beyond stood a wooden gate, slightly ajar, its hinges rusted and the surface scarred by time. When I pushed it open, the creak that followed sounded like the sigh of something ancient waking from a long slumber dot inside. The air felt different, thicker, quieter, as if sound itself were softened by a veil. The scent of damp earth mingled with the subtle sweetness of wild jasmine, while a faint metallic tang lingered beneath. I wasn't sure if that smell came from the rusted gate behind me or from something buried deep beneath the soil. Sunlight filtered softly through a canopy of twisted branches, falling not in sharp beams, but as a gentle, hazy glow. The garden didn't spread wide, but folded inward, with paths looping back on themselves. This made it feel much larger than its actual size. Stone walkways curved between wild shrubs, whose blossoms leaned into the path, as if to greet or perhaps guard those who walked by. At the end of one winding path stood an old stone bench, cracked in the middle and partly covered in moss dot, nearby village elders' hold, a story rooted as deeply as the banyan trees around the garden. Though they tell it with no absolute certainty, their conviction has lasted through decades of retelling. During the final days of the war, a small group of Japanese soldiers took refuge here. They carried something heavy, not in size, but in value. Some say it was gold. Others believe it was secret documents, while a few whisper of ceremonial treasures meant never to be lost. The details varied between versions, but one image remained constant. Men seated on that very bench, their uniforms muddied, eyes alert and scanning the garden paths with tense stillness. The garden's dense foliage and tall stone walls would have made it a perfect hiding place, invisible from the road. Back then, there were fewer houses nearby, no hum of motorbikes, no cafe chatter, only the occasional bird call and the steady buzz of cicadas. Long after the soldiers disappeared, the story took an unexpected turn. A barefoot boy, playing where he shouldn't have been, decided to dig near the pond. His small wooden spade struck something solid, not a stone, but a small ingot, smooth-edged and dull under the dirt. It was heavier than it appeared. Unaware of its true value, the boy ran home clutching it like a toy. His grandmother's face, the story goes, shifted from confusion to shock. She said nothing at first, only wrapping it carefully in a cloth. Pouched out from that day on, the whispers thickened like the garden's own undergrowth. Some villagers began searching quietly, afraid that too much attention might draw trouble. A few more ingots appeared over the years, never enough to suggest a fortune, but always enough to keep the hope alive. Whether the rest of the treasure was still hidden or had already been taken remained an open question. Walking deeper into the garden, I noticed the earth spoke its own uneven language. Some patches looked subtly disturbed, the grass a different shade, the soil texture unlike the rest. Near the far wall, a tree's roots bulged above ground, as if wrapped protectively around something beneath. I could easily imagine the soldiers, working here under the cover of night, shovels muffled, breaths quick with urgency. At the center, a small pond mirrored the sky in broken patches of blue and white. Lily pads floated lazily, drifting with the faint breeze. I knelt at the edge, watching a dragonfly hover briefly before darting away. The stillness here had weight, as if every sound had been softened by the years. If the soldiers had hidden something, perhaps they found a strange safety in this very spot. I pictured them pausing to drink from the pond, eyes flicking nervously toward the winding paths. When they left under moonlight, maybe they must have done so knowing they might never return. Did they leave with relief, trusting the garden to guard their secret? Or with dread, realizing what they buried might be lost forever? The elders' stories never agreed on the soldiers' fate. Some said they were captured within days. Others believed they slipped away toward the coast, vanishing like mist at dawn. A few swore the garden was only one stop in a chain of hiding places, each connected by trails now erased by time. I rose and followed a path curling toward the gardens. Far edge, there, hidden in shadow, stood a second arch smaller and partly collapsed, its stones bound by stubborn vines. It looked like an exit, though the path beyond had been swallowed by wild grass. I traced my fingers over the rough stone surface, feeling grooves carved by centuries of wind and rain. It struck me then that the garden was a kind of memory, living archive of everything that had passed through, even if it could never tell its story aloud. Perhaps the real treasure wasn't the gold buried beneath the soil, but the act of remembering itself. A hidden ingot could be stolen, melted, or forgotten, but a story planted in the mind grows across generations, changing, adapting, and surviving far beyond the reach of metal. The villagers kept this tale alive, weaving it into their evenings, cautioning children, and sharing quiet conversations beneath the cool night sky. I paused at the gate, glancing back one last time. Outside, the air felt brighter, louder, almost impatient compared to the garden's calm hush. The garden didn't try to hold me, yet it didn't fully let me go. Its silence followed me down the road, steady and watchful, like a secret waiting patiently to be told as I walked away. I knew I'd carry this feeling with me, not the treasure itself, but the weight of a place steeped in quiet history and hidden stories. The first time I saw the chest, it seemed unremarkable. It sat quietly in the corner of a dim storeroom, edges softened by years of dust and shadow, forgotten, almost invisible. The faint light from a narrow window caught on its iron lock-rusted, and flaking, giving it a gentle reddish glow, like the warmth of old metal. A cracked ceramic vase rested on top, perhaps to disguise its importance, or simply because the chest had been there so long it was just another piece of furniture. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed what made it special: the intricate patterns carved into the wood. Though darkened with age, the wood bore delicate hand-carved motifs unlike any I'd seen before. The designs were unmistakably Japanese curves, and lines flowing with the restrained elegance of a bygone era. Waves curled in repeating arcs along the edges, each crest frozen mid-motion, as if holding the breath of the sea. Cherry blossoms, with petals so thin they seemed ready to fall, spiraled toward a circular emblem at the center. Kneeling beside it, I brushed away a fine layer of dust. The carvings felt deeper than they appeared, preserved by time rather than worn away. My hand lingered over the emblem, sensing it held meaning, perhaps a family crest or a military insignia. The lock was no grand thing, just a simple iron clasp with a hasp and loop, the kind that might have been fastened with a basic padlock long since removed. Now it was secured by nothing more than stubborn corrosion. I tugged gently, and the clasp resisted like a closed jaw. It would not yield without persuasion. After a careful search of the storeroom, I found a thin, flat chisel. It slid neatly under the edge of the lock's plate. The metal groaned as I pried, flakes of rust breaking off like dried leaves. The moment it gave, there was a sound, soft, low, almost like an exhale. I told myself it was only the wood shifting, but the air seemed to change. The lid opened slowly, the hinges stiff but still serviceable. Inside was no trove of gleaming coins or shimmering gold, just a few dull copper coins scattered across the bottom, their surfaces worn to the point where the markings were barely legible. They might have been currency from half a century ago, or from somewhere entirely different. There was no telling without careful study. Beside them lay a folded piece of paper, yellowed and fragile. I lifted it carefully, half expecting it to crumble in my hands. The ink had faded to a brownish gray, the strokes hesitant yet deliberate. The writing was in Japanese, each character penned with a hand that knew its craft but carried the weight of fatigue. The letter was short no more than a dozen lines. I could not read it fully, but a few words stood out. Words like home and promise, and one that seemed to repeat, keep. I imagined the person who wrote it, seated perhaps in a low wooden room, candlelight trembling as they pressed. The brush to paper. Was it a farewell to a loved one? Instructions for finding something left behind? Or simply a note to oneself, a reminder that even amid chaos, certain promises must be kept? The smell of the inside of the chest was faint but unmistakable, a blend of aged cedar, rust, and something else salt, perhaps, as if it had once traveled near or across the sea. My fingers drifted across the base of the interior, and I noticed the wood was slightly uneven in one corner. Pressing there, I felt a hollow space beneath, but there was no easy way to reach it without damaging the chest. I sat back and studied the chest from a distance. This was no ordinary box. Someone had crafted it with care, decorated, locked, and hidden where it might or might not be found. Now, decades later, it had surfaced not with a loud revelation, but with a quiet whisper. The few coins inside felt symbolic, not for their value, but as a token, a sign for whoever opened it. This is the right one. You have found it. The letter, though short, carried more weight than its words suggested. I imagined a soldier during the war, sitting beside the chest. It may once have held more documents, gold, keepsakes. But as danger grew, he likely removed most, leaving only what he couldn't destroy. Perhaps the chest traveled from one hiding place to another, from ship to storehouse passed, from guardian to guardian, each time with fewer contents, until only clues remained as I traced the patterns carved. Into the wood, the waves seemed to shift beneath my fingertips, not just decoration, but a map. Were they coastlines, islands, or a route across water? The central emblem might mark a harbor or place of origin. The carvings drew me in. Their patience and care suggested the chest had been treasured long before the war. Perhaps it belonged to a family for generations, each owner adding to its story. Leaning over the letter again, the faded strokes appeared almost alive in the dusty light. It was strange how an object could feel like a voice, silent, yet speaking across time. For a moment, the storeroom faded. I imagined the soft rustle of waves against a wooden pier, the salty sea air thick with anticipation. A lantern swayed in the wind, casting shadows on a soldier's face as he bent over the chest. His hands moved carefully, placing coins, folding the letter, lowering them inside. He closed the lid and fastened the lock, not with greed, but with the tenderness of leaving something behind for someone who might one day understand. When the vision ended, I was alone again in the dim light, the chest before me, the letter, and coins resting quietly inside. I closed it not to hide, but to preserve the stillness it held. Outside, the air was sharp and clean, but the memory of the carvings lingered beneath my skin. This chest was more than wood and metal. It was a bridge between places, people, and centuries. Somewhere along that bridge, a story waited to be discovered. The river was almost invisible at first, its surface swallowed by the deep blue shadow of night. Only when I stepped closer to the bank did I see the faint trembling of light, golden points slowly emerging in the darkness. They were lanterns, each one set adrift by careful hands, drifting downstream as if they carried something fragile inside them. The glow was soft, never harsh, as though each flame knew it was a guest in the night. The water moved without hurry, and so the lanterns floated like slow-moving stars, their reflections stretching and bending with the current. The ripples, small and constant, gave the light a living quality, as if the river itself were breathing. Somewhere far off, a bell rang from the riverside chapel, a sound so delicate it seemed almost part of the wind. The air carried the faint scent of damp wood and burning wax. Somewhere a child laughed, quick, bright, and then was hushed by a voice I could not see. It reminded me of the stories I had heard in Manila, stories told in a tone that balanced between warning and invitation. There were whispers of underground tunnels beneath the city, dug hurriedly during the war and later abandoned. They were said to be filled with forgotten gold bars, crates of coins, perhaps even jewels too large to imagine. Official records said nothing. The government denied the rumors. Yet the stories persisted, traded in late-night conversations, over coffee that had gone cold or bottles that had gone warm. Standing by this river, watching the lanterns drift, I could almost believe the two scenes were connected, the secret tunnels and this quiet procession of light. In the tailies, some of the gold was never recovered because it was moved far from the city, hidden in places no one expected, guarded by rivers and forests. Perhaps these waters had once been part of that path. Perhaps not. An old fisherman appeared at the edge of my sight. His boat was low in the water, its hull so worn it looked silvered by years of use. He did not row. Instead, he let the current carry him, the lanterns passing slowly beside him like silent companions. I wondered if he knew the stories, if he carried them as one carries the weight of memory, not heavy enough to break you, but always present. The further downstream I walked, the quieter the world became. Even the cicadas seemed to lower their song. The lanterns multiplied, so many that the river began to look like a road of light. They swayed and tilted, occasionally bumping into each other with a tiny, muted tap. It was easy to imagine they were speaking in a language only they knew, perhaps sharing the secrets they had gathered during their slow voyage. A small group of women stood on a wooden dock, placing their lanterns into the water one by one. They didn't speak much, only adjusting the wicks before letting them go. Each time a lantern left their hands, their faces softened, as if releasing something they had been holding on to for too long. I thought of how light behaves on water, how it can look endless when reflected, how it can create shapes that never truly exist, how it can fool the eye into thinking it sees more than it does. Perhaps the stories of the Manila tunnels were the same, reflections and distortions of something that once had substance, but now survives mostly in the imagination. And yet, just like these lanterns, the stories keep drifting forward, past, along from one generation to another, illuminating the darkness, if only for a short while. The night deepened. A thin mist began to rise from the water, curling around the lanterns without extinguishing them. From a distance, they now looked like small islands floating in a clouded sea. Somewhere beyond the bend, I heard the faint echo of music. Slow, lilting tune, the kind played for dances where no one hurries. I followed the curve of the river until I reached a place where the banks were lined with mangroves. Their roots tangled into the water like fingers reaching for something hidden. The lanterns threaded their way between them. Some caught briefly in the roots before breaking free again. Watching them struggle and then continue felt like watching a metaphor I couldn't quite name. In that moment, I realized the beauty of the scene was not in its certainty, but in its openness to interpretation. To someone else, these lanterns might have been just part of a local festival, nothing more than a tradition carried out each year. To me, they were messengers of a past I could not see, perhaps carrying the memory of gold buried in damp earth, of hands that worked quickly under the cover of night, of promises made and broken. The fisherman's boat reappeared further downstream, this time with him standing at the bow, a net in his hands. He cast it into the water with a practiced motion, not caring if it tangled with the drifting lights. I realized then that to him, the river was not a stage for stories, but a place of work, a source of life. The lanterns were beautiful, yes, but they did not change the fact that morning would come, and he would still have to fish. I lingered until the last of the lanterns disappeared into the dark, their light swallowed by distance. Without them, the river returned to its hidden state, a stretch of black silk under the moon. The air grew cooler, and the mist thickened, making the opposite bank fade like an old photograph. The memory of those lights stayed in my mind long after they were gone. They reminded me that some things are meant to be fleeting, a story told in whispers, a rumor passed in the night, a glimmer of gold glimpsed but never touched. And perhaps that is the truest form of treasure, not the possession itself, but the brief, luminous moment when you believe it might be real. The path began almost without warning, a thin ribbon of earth threading its way between two leaning stone walls. The stones were not cut in the clean, sharp lines of modern buildings. These had been placed by hands that no longer existed, fitted together without mortar, their gaps now filled by decades of moss. The air smelled of damp leaves and old rain, the kind that never quite dries in a place like this. I stepped carefully. The ground was uneven, softened by years of fallen debris, and every now and then a root reached up like a curled finger, ready to catch the unwary traveler. The walls on either side rose no higher than my shoulders in some places, and above them the trees formed a vaulted ceiling of green, filtering the sunlight into a muted, emerald glow dot. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't belong to empty places, but to places that have learned to keep their own counsel. I could hear my own footsteps in the thick stillness, along with the occasional flutter of a bird startled from its perch. Somewhere deep inside the ruins, water dripped slowly, the sound echoing like a clock no one had wound in centuries. Locals said this place had once been a guard station, a small outpost where soldiers kept watch over a chest, the contents of which were known only to the highest command. Some claimed it was full of gold, others that it held documents more valuable than any treasure, secrets that could change the course of a war. No one knew for certain. What was known was that the war ended, the soldiers left, and nature took back what was hers. The moss seemed almost deliberate in its coverage, like a shroud draped respectfully over a sleeping giant. It clung to the walls, the stones, even the roots that snaked down from the higher ground. In places, it had swallowed entire door frames, leaving only the faintest suggestion of an opening. You could pass through without knowing you had crossed. A threshold dot as I followed the path deeper. The air grew cooler, shaded by centuries-old trees whose trunks twisted like ropes. The ruins opened into a courtyard of sorts, though it was hard to tell at first. Everything was so overgrown. A square of sunlight spilled onto the moss-covered ground, and in that light the green seemed almost unreal, too rich to belong to the ordinary world. I found a section of wall that had collapsed inward, revealing what might once have been a storeroom. Inside, a few stone shelves jutted out from the wall, their surfaces softened by lichen. A rusted iron hinge lay half buried in the dirt, too corroded to reveal what it had once held together. The air was thick with the scent of wet stone, and when I touched the wall, moisture beaded on my fingertips. I tried to imagine the place in its prime, the guards in uniform, the sound of boots on packed earth, the flicker of torches in the night. I imagined the chest, heavy, bound with iron, set in the center of the room like the heart of the whole outpost. I could almost hear the low murmur of voices, the cautious shifting of weight from one foot to another as men waited for orders. But now the only sentries were the trees, the only guard the wind moving through the leaves. The path continued on, narrower now, winding between toppled stones that forced me to step sideways. In one place, a massive slab had fallen at an angle, creating a low arch I had to duck beneath. On the far side, the ground dipped slightly, and the air became even damper. Ferns sprouted in the cracks between stones, their delicate fronds trembling when a breeze slipped through dot. It was easy to feel as though the ruins were watching, not in a threatening way, but with the quiet patience of something that has seen far more than I ever would. They had endured storms, invasions, the slow grind of time itself. My presence was just another passing moment in their long, unmoving life. A small alcove caught my eye. The stone inside was smoother, less worn, as though it had been protected for much of its existence. Carved faintly into the wall was a symbol, a circle intersected by a line, weathered almost beyond recognition. I traced it with my fingers and felt the shallow groove beneath the moss. Was it a marker? A signature? Or simply a flourish from some long-forgotten artisan? The sound of the wind shifted, becoming a low, hollow hum as it moved through the ruins. It carried the scent of salt from somewhere beyond. Perhaps the sea was not far. That thought stirred another rumor I'd heard, that the outpost was not just for guarding, but for transferring. That treasure would arrive here by land, rest under guard for a short time, and then be moved toward the coast under cover of night. If so, this narrow path might have been the last stretch before the treasure vanished into the wider world. Eventually, the path began to rise, the stones beneath my feet slick with moss. I climbed carefully, each step making the earth crunch faintly beneath me. When I reached the top, the ruins ended abruptly, giving way to open air and a view of the forest stretching away in all directions. Somewhere in the canopy below, the path I had followed disappeared entirely, hidden from view as if it had never existed. Standing there, I realized how easily places can slip from memory, how a station once filled with urgency and purpose can fade into a quiet shadow of itself. Yet even in that shadow, there was something enduring, not the treasure itself perhaps, but the story of it, woven into the moss, the stones, the stillness. As I turned back toward the entrance, the wind moved again through the ruins, making the moss shiver slightly, like a whisper I could almost hear but not quite understand. The forest path gave way to a lighter sky, the kind of pale, silvery blue that promised open water nearby. The air changed, too, less heavy with the scent of earth and moss, more alive with the faint tang of salt. Soon the trees thinned, replaced by wind-sculpted shrubs and grasses that bent in one direction, as though bowing to the ocean's unseen will. Then, suddenly, the ground ended. The cliff rose like the edge of a great stone table, its surface worn smooth where people had stood for centuries, looking out at the same unbroken horizon. I approached slowly, each step accompanied by the low roar of waves far below. The sound wasn't constant. It swelled and retreated like breath. When the wind carried it just right, I could almost feel the vibrations underfoot. The sea spread out in a vast sheet of shifting color. In the shadow of passing clouds, it was deep slate blue, but where the light touched, it glittered silver white. Small gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp against the steady rhythm of water. The scent of brine was sharper here, mingling with the faint sweetness of flowering coastal plants that clung stubbornly to the rocks. I sat on a flat, sun-warmed boulder and let the sound of the waves sink into me. They were gentle today, rolling in with a kind of patience, as though they too remembered the weight of what had passed here. It was hard to imagine violence in such calm waters, but history often hides itself under soft light. After the war, this coast drew treasure hunters from across the world. They came with maps inked on old paper, whispered coordinates, and stories, traded like currency. Some believed gold had been hidden in underwater caves. Others thought the cliff concealed entrances to tunnels that reached far inland. Teams arrived with ropes, picks, diving gear, even explosives. Some found nothing. Some found just enough, a single coin, a scrap of metal, to keep their hope alive. And of course, there were those who came not to seek, but to deceive. International swindlers who promised miraculous finds, who lured investors with photographs of glittering hoards, only to vanish with the funding before a single shovel touched the earth. In time, the locals learned to be cautious when strangers spoke too eagerly of gold. From where I sat, it was easy to see how such stories would take root. The cliff seemed ancient enough to guard any number of secrets. Dark seams in the rock hinted at hidden chambers, and in places where the stone jutted out over the water, shadows pooled in a way that suggested the mouths of caves. At low tide, it was said, you could reach them, though the currents below were treacherous and had claimed more than one reckless diver. I closed my eyes and listened. The wind moved over the cliff in long, sighing gusts, carrying faint voices from the water's edge far below, fishermen calling to one another, or perhaps only the wind itself, shaping sound out of emptiness. The waves struck the base of the cliff in slow succession, a deep, booming impact followed by a softer hiss as the water retreated through cracks in the stone. Somewhere down there, I thought, the sea might still hold fragments of a past untouched. Since the war, a rusted clasp from a chest, a piece of gold too heavy for the waves to carry away. But it was equally possible that nothing remained at all, that time and tide had erased every trace, leaving only the story to survive. I opened my eyes to find the horizon had shifted subtly, the sun now low enough to scatter long bars of light across the water. The edge of the cliff glowed pale gold, and the shadows of seabirds swept silently over the rocks. In that light, I could see faint carvings scratched into the stone beneath where I sat. Initials, dates, symbols whose meaning had long since slipped from memory. Perhaps they were left by soldiers once stationed here, or by treasure hunters, marking their own passage. A memory surfaced from a conversation I'd had days earlier with an old fisherman in a nearby village. He'd told me in a voice that carried both amusement and warning that the sea was the best liar of all. "It will let you think you've found something," he'd said, "just so it can take it away again when you're not looking." He'd laughed after saying it, but his eyes had drifted toward the horizon in a way that made me think he was speaking from experience. The more I sat there, the more I understood his meaning. The sea's gentleness was deceptive. It could turn without warning, just as stories could twist in the telling. Treasure, too, had that power, to lure, to promise, and to vanish. Still, I found myself leaning forward, scanning the coastline. In both directions. To the north, the cliff gave way to a narrow stretch of beach, accessible only by a steep, winding path. To the south, the rock rose higher still, jagged and sheer, ending in a point that thrust far out into the waves. Both seemed places where secrets might hide, though the sea guarded them with an unhurried, endless patience. The wind picked up, tugging at my hair, and sending the scent of salt deeper into my lungs. I closed my eyes once more, letting the rhythm of the waves replace the pace of my thoughts. The sound was both grounding and infinite, a reminder that the sea had existed long before the wars, the hunters, and the rumors, and would remain long after all of it was gone. When I finally rose to leave, the sun had nearly touched the horizon. The water turned molten gold where it met the light, and every wave seemed to carry a piece of the sky toward the shore. I took one last look over the edge, watching the foam spread and dissolve against the rocks, then turned back toward the inland path. As I walked away, the sea's voice softened behind me, as if closing its story for now. Whether it was hiding treasure or nothing at all, it would keep its secret, just as it had for decades, maybe even centuries. And perhaps that was the point. Some treasures are not meant to be found, only imagined, so that the listening never truly ends. The inn was quiet by the time I returned from the cliff. The hum of conversation from the dining room had faded, leaving only the faint clink of glassware being tidied away. Upstairs, my small room felt like a world apart, 4 walls lined with old wood, a low table at the center, and a single candle casting a gentle, flickering glow. On the table lay the map, which I had found earlier that day, tucked between the pages of a weathered travel journal in a shop, smelling of ink and salt. At first, it seemed unremarkable thick paper softened by age, frayed edges, and corners curling like dried leaves. But under the flickering candlelight, the faint ink lines appeared to shift, as if the map were alive. I carefully unrolled it, weighing the corners down with smooth stones from my pocket to keep it flat. The paper gave off a dusty scent, the smell of forgotten libraries and old attics. Faded lines traced coastlines and islands in an old style, imperfect and drawn from memory rather than precise measurement. The candlelight revealed something unusual, not ink, but faint impressions pressed into the paper. Tilting my head, I saw tiny marks forming a dotted line that stretched from the coast of Vietnam across the South China Sea toward the scattered islands of the Philippines. Along the route, small symbols appeared: a star, a crescent moon, crossed lines, Tracing the route with my fingertip, I recognized the path began near a harbor town I had visited. The marks suggested more than geography. They hinted at a secret code, a private language between the mapmaker and the trusted follower. Leaning closer, I noticed something else. Along the bottom edge of the map, almost hidden in the shadows, a series of faint handwritten notes. They weren't in any single language I could identify. A mixture of Old Portuguese, fragments of Tagalog, and characters that might have been Japanese. Some words I understood. Oro for gold, cueva for cave, bahay for house. Others were entirely alien to me. The candle flame bent in the draft from the window, and the shifting light made the map's network of lines feel alive. My mind began stitching together the stories I'd collected so far. The whispered legends from a tea shop, the gold found in an old garden, the wooden chest with its rusty lock, the glow of lanterns drifting on dark water, the moss-covered ruins. The sea's patient song from the cliff's edge. It was all here. Not literally, perhaps, not in exact detail, but in the feeling of the map itself. It was a tapestry woven from fragments of memory, rumor, and wishful thinking. And yet, there was something undeniably deliberate about it. The marks were too precise to be random. The sequence of symbols aligned eerily well with known trading routes from centuries past. I remembered something an elderly woman had told me in a riverside market in Manila. The gold is not where the story begins, but where it ends. She had been selling fruit, not maps, but her words echoed now in the candlelit room. If the line on the map represented a journey, maybe the treasure wasn't at the final mark at all. Maybe it was hidden somewhere along the way, in a place most seekers would rush past without noticing. I leaned back, letting the wooden chair creak beneath me. The candle's wax had begun to pool, sending up a faint scent of honey. Shadows lengthened. Across the map, connecting islands and coasts in ways that the actual lines could not. In those shadows, I imagined secret harbors lit only by moonlight, caves whose entrances were hidden behind waterfalls, and ships slipping silently between reefs under a sky thick with stars. The longer I stared, the more the map became something else, less a tool for navigation, more a bridge between times. The dotted line was no longer just a path across the sea. It was a connection between every story I had heard, every place I had stood. Vietnam's quiet villages, the Philippines' lantern-lit rivers, the weathered ruins on lonely islands. All of them seemed to glow faintly in my mind, as if the map were calling them back to life. I thought about the many hands that might have once held the same paper-weathered sailors, soldiers with secret orders folded in their pockets, traders, chasing fortune, fugitives seeking escape. Perhaps even the legendary figures locals whispered about, men said to have hidden their wealth beneath layers of earth and myth. Some seekers surely found nothing. Others might have discovered exactly what they sought, only to lose it again to the sea or to greed. Yet the map endured through it all. It didn't care if its secrets were revealed. Its true value lay in the search itself, in the way it sparked imagination in anyone who gazed upon it. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The candle flickered violently, nearly extinguished before steadying once more. I cupped my hand around the flame, as if protecting the fragile thread that connected me to all who had chased this same mystery before. The dotted line ended at a small, unnamed island. I tried to recall if I'd heard of it, but it was absent from every modern chart I'd seen. Perhaps it had been renamed, swallowed by the sea, or existed only on this single sheet of paper. A strange calm settled over me. Whether the island was real or not seemed less important than the image in my mind. A pale strip of sand, palm trees leaning over the water, waves breaking on a coral reef. Somewhere inside, maybe hidden in a cool cave, something weighted gold. Relics, or perhaps nothing but the satisfaction of having arrived. I rolled the map carefully and tied it with twine. As I did, Candlelight caught the last symbol before the line's end, a small spiral. Its meaning was a mystery, but it felt like a storyteller's mark, a sign that the tale stretched beyond the page. I placed the map by my bed, letting the candle burn low. Soon sleep would take me, and the dotted line would journey with me into dreams, across calm seas and storms, through gardens and ruins, until it led me to whatever treasure real or imagined it had always promised. The evening air felt softer here, as though the wind itself carried stories instead of dust. You sit in the quiet, looking out over a landscape that has changed countless times, yet somehow holds an unshakable stillness. In that stillness lies a truth you've been circling for days. The greatest treasure might not be gold or jewels, but the memories that have formed along the way. And yet, somewhere beneath the surface of that thought, another one stirs. The kind of thought that comes when someone leans across a cafe table, lowers their voice, and says, "You know, they never really found it." The villagers speak of the past with the same ease they speak of the weather. They remember the war. Years, not from books, but from the weight of footsteps on these very roads, the rattle of truck convoys in the night, and the rumors whispered between households. In those years, wealth moved in silence. Gold bars, ceremonial coins, even jeweled offerings, taken from one place and hidden in another. Official records are silent, but oral histories suggest that not everything made it back to where it was meant to go. Some say it was lost in chaos. Others claim it was hidden deliberately, waiting for the right hands to find it. When you pass the old market square, the stones under your feet feel like the pages of a book whose lines have been worn down to near blankness. Still, you can almost read them if you pay attention. A stall owner polishing brass lamps might casually mention that his grandfather once carried a heavy crate down to the river one night, under orders not to ask what was inside. War spoils, he calls it, shrugging, but his eyes watch yours a little too closely. As though measuring your reaction dot, it's easy to imagine how such a thing could happen. In the confusion of retreat, in the desperate reorganizing of battle, lines, certain treasures, not always marked on any manifest, could simply vanish, hidden away in cellars, buried under abandoned outposts, sealed in caves whose entrances have long been reclaimed by moss. And while the years wash away the names and the politics, the idea remains. Gold becomes a symbol, not just of wealth, but of the possibility that history still keeps a few secrets from us. The conspiracy theory is not new. Decades after the fighting stopped, there were still those who came here with shovels and crude maps, chasing the faint outlines of rumors. Some were quiet hobbyists. Others were entire teams backed by shadowy sponsors who claimed private historical interest. A few found old coins, rusted rifle parts, or fragments of chests so corroded they broke apart in their hands. None, officially, found what they were looking for. But the thing about conspiracies is that official statements are often part of the game. A lucky finder could easily disappear back to their home country, treasure carefully concealed, leaving the rest of the world none the wiser. You think back to the old stone bridge you crossed 2 days ago. It wasn't marked on any tourist map, but it appeared suddenly after a bend in the path stretching over a narrow ravine. Beneath it, the water ran shallow and brown, a kind of place that could hide nothing at first glance. But what if, long ago, the ravine was deeper? What if, during a different season, when the rain swelled the river, it became an untraceable route for moving something valuable without attracting attention? It's exactly the kind of detail treasure hunters dream about, a perfect mix of nature's camouflage and human ingenuity. The truth is, nobody can say for certain whether the treasure was ever here. Some historians scoff at the idea entirely, pointing out that most wartime spoils were accounted for in the chaotic inventories after the surrender. But others quietly admit that accounted for can mean many things, especially when the records are incomplete or when certain items were never meant to appear on the ledgers in the first place. In this way, the treasure exists in a liminal space between fact and fiction, sustained by equal parts hope and doubt. And so, while you walk through the soft glow of late afternoon, you realize the treasure is twofold. The first is the kind you can carry in your hands, gold bars, coins, artifacts, if they exist at all. The second, and perhaps the more enduring, is the kind you carry in your mind, the texture of moss on a stone wall, the smell of tea leaves drying in the sun, the sound of footsteps echoing through an empty alley. These are treasures immune to theft or decay. Yet the whisper of the other treasure lingers, making each shadowed doorway and half-forgotten trail feel like the start of a puzzle. Somewhere along the journey, you've come to appreciate the balance between knowing and not knowing. If someone handed you a map with a red X on it tomorrow, you might follow it, not just for the promise of gold, but for the adventure it would demand. The long walks, the quiet moments of doubt, the thrill of finding something, even if that something is not what you expected. In the gentle memories you've gathered, there is no clear answer. Only questions that trail off into the horizon, like the river disappearing into the dusk. Perhaps the real conspiracy is not whether the treasure exists, but why the story has lasted so long. Maybe, deep down, people want it to remain unsolved, to keep alive the possibility that one day, someone like you might stumble across a glint of metal under the roots of an old tree and realize that the rumors were more than just stories. The day fades. Crickets begin their evening chorus, and the smell of wood smoke drifts from a nearby home. You feel the weight of the air change, that subtle shift when day turns to night and the land seems to exhale. You close your eyes, and in the darkness, both treasures remain, the memories already yours, and the mystery still out there, waiting for the kind of heart that can't resist following where the story leads. The waves are gentle tonight, rising and falling like slow, unhurried breaths that soothe the shore. They touch the sand with a softness that might be mistaken for a quiet sigh. Each crest curls delicately into itself before reaching the beach, leaving behind a delicate lace of foam that sparkles momentarily in the silver glow of the moonlight, only to fade away as if it were never there. Above, the moon hangs low over the sea, like a silver coin resting on an endless stretch of deep velvet. Its pale light spills across the water, forming a shimmering, trembling path that seems to guide some unseen traveler safely home. The air is cool, but not biting, just enough chill to make a single warm blanket feel like a gentle embrace, wrapping you in quiet comfort. From the open window, the night breeze drifts in, carrying the fresh scent of salt and the faint rustle of palm leaves. It moves softly through the room, like a silent visitor brushing gently against your skin and setting the curtains into a slow, graceful dance. You pull the blanket closer, feeling its reassuring weight settle around you, a steady anchor in the calm stillness. Outside, the night hums softly with life, the distant call of a night bird echoing in the darkness, the faint clink of a rope against a boat's mast, the subtle murmur of waves meeting rock. None of these sounds demand your focus. They exist simply as part of the earth's own lullaby, a peaceful symphony to the night. In this deep calm, your mind begins to drift. Memories of your journey return slowly, one by one, not rushing but unfolding like a slow-moving film, each scene revealing itself with gentle clarity and quiet grace. You see the lantern-lit street of the old town, where each light swayed gently in the breeze, spilling gold over worn stone paths. You pass once more by the tea shop hidden behind a wooden gate, where steam curled from porcelain cups and the air was scented with jasmine. The forest of bamboo rises again before you, its tall green pillars swaying in rhythm with the wind, each leaf whispering in its own small voice. Then comes the garden, flowers blooming quietly beneath the watch of an old stone wall. Their colors softened in the fading afternoon light. The river flows calmly, its surface like a mirror, catching the sky's reflection, holding a secret known only to itself. It moves quietly, weaving through the landscape, connecting everything like a thread that binds moments together. And here lies the true treasure, not in coins or relics, but in those still, gentle seconds when time seems to pause, allowing you to fully see and feel the world without rush. Your breath falls into that same soothing rhythm, slow, deep, and effortless. Each inhale draws in the crisp, cool night air, filling your lungs with calm. Each exhale releases the last remnants of wakefulness and tension. Your body grows heavier, sinking comfortably into the mattress, wrapped in the soft, warm embrace of the blanket. In this quiet moment, all that matters is the present, the calm, the breath, the feeling of peace settling softly around you. The moonlight shifts softly across the room, tracing delicate patterns on the floor, the walls, and the curve of the blanket draped over your shoulder. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, the waves continue their endless dance, moving in timeless patterns they have followed for centuries. In this endless rhythm, you sense yourself becoming part of something much larger, the same sea, the same wind, the same peaceful nights that countless travelers before you have known and cherished. Your mind drifts even further, like a small boat slipping free from its mooring, carried gently down a calm and steady current. There is no need to steer or resist. The water itself knows the way, guiding you with quiet assurance. You can still hear the sea's low, steady voice, speaking in a language older than words. The wind brushes cool against your skin, wrapping you in a soothing hush that gently pushes the world's distractions far away. Even the moon, high and steady above, watches over your rest, patient, unwavering, a silent guardian in the night. The journey you've taken remains with you, but now it feels softer, wrapped in the quiet stillness of this moment. Every image, every place, every sound from the road has found its place within you, not scattered or lost, but safely stored, like treasures kept close to your heart. The waves continue their ceaseless song. The moon holds its silver path across the sky. The blanket maintains its steady warmth. And you, finally, are ready to let go. Let every sound fade into the distance. Let the whisper of the waves soften until it becomes just a feeling. Let the moonlight dissolve into a gentle glow behind your closed eyes. There is nothing more to seek, no map to follow, no path to walk. The treasure you sought has already been found, resting quietly inside you, warm, steady, and unshakable. Of lanterns, the garden in bloom, the forest and the river, all of it is still with you. But you no longer need to hold them tightly. They are part of you now, and they will stay. Feel the way your breath has deepened, slow and even, carrying you deeper into rest. Feel how your body has softened into the bed, the blanket holding you. Like a quiet shore. Outside, the wind still moves, the sea still breathes, the night still watches. But you are safe here, far from the pull of the day. Allow yourself to drift, thought by thought, until there is only the comfort of the present moment. No hurry, no wait, no need. Just the gentle rhythm of rest. Close your eyes. Let the warmth spread through you. Let the quiet settle around you like a second blanket. And as sleep comes to meet you, may it be deep, unbroken, and sweet. Good night, until we meet again on another gentle journey.